quickly. So this is the council meeting, January 27th, 2021. I'm Chair Charlie Zolli, and it's my honor to call the meeting to order, and we will determine our quorum by taking a roll call. Liz, what's your job?
Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson. Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Musset. Musset. Sterner. Sterner. Vento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here. Here.
Zurin.
Present.
And Chair Zolli.
I'm here. We have a quorum. Welcome, everybody. Now our first up is approval of the agenda. No roll call is necessary unless there's any objections. We will move forward. And with the approval of the minutes. This is the minutes from January 13th, 2021. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Chambliss approves.
Thank you, Riva. Is there a second?
Lindstrom seconds.
Thank you, Peter. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Liz, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings. Cummings. Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Sterner. Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zurin.
Aye.
And Chair Zolli.
Aye. And I see through the chat that Linnea Atlas Ingebretson is here and that Molly Commons voted aye on the minutes. That motion has carried. Next order of business is I am pleased to introduce Brian Ricks, who is going to be giving us a presentation on the Metropolitan Airports Commission. He is the CEO of the MAC, and I have known Brian for a number of years before he was the CEO of the Airport Commission, going back to when he was the CEO of the Duluth Airport. And I'm really thrilled. What a great person to have managing really an important state asset. And we talk a lot about the effects of the pandemic on Metropolitan Council activity, but it, I'm sure, has been, and we know it's been really a difficult year for the airport. So, Brian, welcome to our meeting, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Zolli. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can.
Okay, great. Well, wonderful to be with you this afternoon, and thank you for the invite to give you a little perspective of what's happening at the airport. Also want to recognize Council Member Ferguson. Chris is the liaison to the Metropolitan Airports Commission and really provides a great insight and provides that, I think, collaboration between the organizations. Also, want to shout out to both Nick Thompson and Russ Owens on your staff for the great work and collaboration that we have together. A lot of that work is done with Bridget Reef, our VP of Planning, Development, and Environment. Bridget's on the call as well this afternoon. So good afternoon, councilors. What I'm going to do today is give you a little perspective for those of you that may not know as much about the MAC. I'll start there with just a few slides, and then we'll move on to really the impacts around COVID. And I want to talk also about some of the capital improvement programs, plans that we continue to move forward with, both at MSP and the relievers. So I know we have a presentation there that looks like it's coming up right on time. You can go ahead and move to the next. Actually, go ahead and move to the next slide, slide 3. I'll start there. I think many of you are aware, but the MAC was a corporation that really the state created back in 1943, designed around 3 primary purposes. One, to promote the efficient, safe, and economical air commerce, to develop the full potentials of aviation in the Twin Cities area, and thirdly, and very importantly, is to minimize the environmental impacts, adverse environmental impacts from airports. And we take that very, very seriously. I think, what many of you probably know is we've invested over $500 million mitigating noise in communities all around MSP. We have an active noise mitigation program at some of our reliever airports as well. So that's critical as we continue to move forward. And then finally, we can own and operate airports within a 35-mile radius of downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that system, obviously with Minneapolis in the center, designed to accommodate really our scheduled commercial and cargo activity, and a reliever system that's really designed to relieve Minneapolis of other types of general aviation and corporate activity, to ensure that we can accommodate any ongoing demand at Minneapolis. This system is the largest system in the country that's operated by one entity, autonomous entity focused on aviation, and it works very, very well. And I think if we just reflect back a couple of years to the Final Four and Super Bowl, where some of these reliever airports really accommodated that demand of, in case of the Super Bowl, 1,100 corporate aircraft descending upon our Twin Cities metro area to partake in that event. So it works very well. Next slide. A little bit about our commission, and I want to first and foremost say that Chair Rick King, who's been in the role about 1.5 years now, sends his greetings and has done a fantastic job of leading the commission and our organization through what has been the most difficult time in our history, financially and operationally. And you can see our other commissioners there. I know Commissioner Crimmins is also involved with Met Council activities, and so I want to do a brief shout out to him. But 15 total commissioners, for the most part, are appointed by the governor, with the exceptions of the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Each have a appointee as well. And as part of this, we have 4 outstate commissioners on the bottom right there, currently from St. Cloud, Duluth, Thief River Falls, and Rochester. So a great commission that works very, very well. Next slide. Our mission is connecting you to your world, and what a nice slide showing actual activity in our terminal facility. And if you go to the next slide, our vision is providing your best airport experience. You can go ahead and move forward. A little bit about our employees. We have 650 employees, or I should say we did have 650 employees prior to dropping into COVID. One of our measures to do can to survive this event, is to cut costs wherever possible. And we have not furloughed anybody, and I've been very serious about not having to do that. But what we have done is we have not replaced many positions that were either open, and I think maybe we had a dozen positions that may have been opened as we entered this. The rest are really a result of not filling positions unless they are absolutely critical to the operations. So our staff is somewhat stressed because they've picked up the pace, but they certainly understand. Right now we have 62 open positions, just to give you a little sense of that. We operate much like a city with our own police, fire, dispatch, building inspection. Bridget and her planning and development and environment department, our maintenance department, which keeps the runways clear of snow, mows the grass, takes care of signs and painting, a trades department, and obviously a finance department that's been very tasked over the last year. We operate the airport's commission like a business. We do not collect general taxpayer dollars, and so we're funded by rents and fees paid by users. It's a good model. It's a common model in the airport industry, and one we're very proud of. We've got very excellent employees. Typically, employees come here and they stay here, which is good for our organization. Next slide. I'll move now into the pandemic, and you can go ahead and forward to the next slide. Obviously, as I said, the most challenging time our industry has ever experienced, much like you at Met Council and others are experiencing. But to put that into context, the U.S. airport industry has lost about $23 billion, or will lose up to that amount as we go into March of 21. We're projecting about $17 billion in losses as we continue through April of 21 to April of 22. From a MAC perspective, we've come short to the tune of about $194 million in our revenues. And again, to put that, bring that closer to home, our budget was projecting about $406 million in revenues this year. So about between 47 and 48% decrease. We also have a income stream that's called passenger facility charges. It's a $4.50 fee that's added on to anyone who books flight out of Minneapolis, and you pay that really out of any airport you fly out of. But it's that passenger facility charge is designed, it's collected by the airlines, and it's remitted back to us to support capital investment that we do, or back bonds that are issued for capital investment. And we're going to lose about $51 million on top of the 194, including that. So about a $245 million shortfall on our budget this year. Next slide. Kind of moving on to passenger numbers, and this is called monthly enplanements. Enplanements are basically boardings. And we started the year off really strong, up 6 and almost 9% in January and February, and then obviously things dropped. I recall talking to you, Chair Zelli, when you were in your former role, and being very worried about the MnDOT construction project leading into the airport on Highway 5. And I'm not sure if it was your foresight or the current commissioners, but what better time to do that project? And you can see as that project started in April and maybe even late March, we were down over 95% in our passenger volumes. Again, when you look at April, 70,000 passengers in a month that we would typically experience over 1.5 million passengers at the time, March and April, when we should have been seeing spring break traffic, tremendous impacts. It's increased slightly since then, as you can see from the graphs, but really flattened out more recently with the second and third wave and the travel restrictions that have gone into place. Next slide. As far as air service routes, Typically, we would be up over 200 routes, active nonstop routes to different destinations, both domestic and international. You can see how that dropped in the green line to 91 active routes in early May, with 105 suspended routes. That number again has fluctuated somewhat, has grown. We were up to about 167 into December, but now it has dropped back down to about 155 active routes. Of those 155, there's 134 domestic routes and 21 international routes. Those international routes are primarily Canadian and Mexico and Caribbean routes. And then on the other side of that is 62 suspended routes. 44 of those are domestic, 18 are international. We have had a little bit of good news recently where Sun Country, you may have seen it, is announcing an additional 9 routes to different destinations that will start in May. But we've also had some bad news with the extension of the international travel restrictions, and that is that Amsterdam is going to be suspended. That suspension started last Saturday, and right now is forecasted through February 11th. We hope to get that back, and we are working hard, and I believe we will in February, but it's the result of we need more testing at the airport, which certainly will happen. Next slide. This is where we're at currently. Parking, which is almost a third. Parking and ground transportation are almost a third of our revenue source, and we typically generate 110 to 112 million in parking revenue each year. We have about 25 or 28,000 parking spots. We're seeing an average of about 5,000 vehicles a day. Revenues are about 25% of 2019 levels. Concessions hit hard by this situation. Obviously, 135 concessionaires at the airport. At the low point, there were only about 25 that were open, and those that were open were in reduced hours. We're back to about 54% of venues open, again, still with reduced hours, but that's an improvement. And flight operations continue to be 30 to 40% below 2019 levels. Typically, we would see 1,200 flights per day at MSP, and again, that number dropped down to a low of about 400 early on, but is about 60% right now. Next slide. We have provided some, relief. We saw early on it was important, and I apologize. I recognize. I just noticed before this that some of these numbers are not accurate in here. We have actually provided about 65 million in waivers and deferrals to both airlines and our concessions. 41 million of that is related to airlines, and about 24 million has been forwarded to concessionaires, and those are 2020 numbers. That will continue into 2021 into this year. I don't have those numbers yet, but it gives you a little sense. And our feeling as an airport commission is we're in this together with our stakeholders, and we're going to continue to do whatever we can to support them as we move through this. Next slide. A little bit about our relievers, which actually, we did see, as you can see from the graphics, reductions for a number of months. But when it all comes together, we're actually going to report about a 3% increase in reliever airport operations. Now, I want to qualify that because that is not we kind of term it heavy metal or corporate aviation operations. That activity has been suspended pretty significantly. The operational increases really has been more in flight training activity, which does not purchase a lot of fuel at those airports. But it's still, we saw increased activity, especially at Flying Cloud and Anoka Airport. So that's good. St. Paul has been hit hard with the amount of corporate activity that is accomplished down there. So that is one airport that certainly saw a decline in activity. Next slide. I want to move into a little bit about our health safety program, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Early on, we put together a playbook as we dropped into COVID that was really focused around guidelines for our MSP community and guidelines to ensure that we could keep both employees and passengers that still needed to travel as safe as possible. We worked with the Minnesota Department of Health, the CDC, and other federal agencies to ensure that what we were doing here in Minneapolis was related to ensuring that we could give people confidence that they could be safe as they were coming through our facility. You can go to the next slide. That program really revolved around 6 major areas. Robust cleaning, which in Minneapolis, I think have had a good history of keeping our restrooms and facilities clean. We've won awards over the last 4 years as the best airport in our between 25 and 40 million passengers. So we had a good head start on that. And I think our culture in Minnesota lends to a clean environment, which is good. Hand sanitizing obviously is a big part of our efforts here. Along with face coverings, our commission established a requirement that individuals wear face coverings when coming through the airport. Social distancing, you'll see all kinds of decals throughout our facility like you see in other organizations. We've installed hundreds of shields and barriers through the facility, again, at those contact points. And we also implemented a pre-book parking system. And the nice thing about that system, so that people can reserve parking in advance, but the nice thing about that system is it's a complete touchless technology and QR technology through your personal device. So you can come through our parking facilities and not have to touch any of our parking machines. Next slide. So we've rolled out a pretty high profile campaign, and tried to get this out wherever possible. So you'll see many signs of this when you come through, and obviously verbal messages, social media messages. So tremendous amount of effort has gone into this on all fronts. Next slide. The other thing that has occurred here is we worked with the state of Minnesota and the Minnesota Department of Health and Vault Health to create a testing facility at the airport. We thought this was important, not only for individuals that had accessibility here, but for our employees and for passengers that needed to get testing. Typically what we've seen is anywhere from 800 to 1,500 people a day go through this facility. And we are currently working on rapid test sites so that those that are incoming on international flights or outgoing or connecting can get rapid tests. So we hope to have some rapid testing capabilities ramped up here in the coming weeks. Next slide. We've also provided traveler care packages for our travelers so that if someone does show up to the airport and they don't have a mask, we provide them this material. They can get it at our information booths. Our police officers do carry some of this around with them as well. So again, trying to do all we can to ensure that no one is unprepared as they fly through the facility. Next slide. And one more thing I'll just say about what we've done is we've acquired some national accreditations. The first one is the GBAC STAR program. It's a partnership with the Global Biorisk Advisory Council in association with the American Association of Airport Executives. Again, it was an application process where we had to apply for this standard, a very in-depth process that we had to go through. And the second one is called Airport Health Accreditation. It's developed by Airports Council International in conjunction with the International Civil Aviation Organization. So again, a focus on best practices that we currently have in place, but also these programs are programs that will continue to move forward to ensure that we are continuing to do all we can. Next slide. And finally, what is the path to recovery? I think it's a good question and one that we're all asking ourselves. Our forecast, the national forecast is for 2020 for us to be about 36% below 2019 domestic levels. We're projecting about 30% right now locally here. Beyond the vaccine, there's a lot of projections about recovery. Carriers will continue to pursue capacity discipline, meaning it will, we want to get those routes back as soon as possible, but carriers will be very focused on obviously right-sizing capacity to demand. So we'll be working on that. It will be uneven geographically. I do think we are well positioned as a hub, and frankly, shout out to Delta Airlines. They have been at the forefront of really implementing things that I think are leading the industry, and it started with them not filling middle seats of their aircraft, and so we're fortunate to have Delta here. What will be the long-term impacts? That's the question about with people doing what we're doing today. How will that eventually impact travel? Right now, we're seeing only about 10% business travel. The rest is leisure travel. That will change over time as the vaccinations become more. People that get vaccinated, but there's a lot of questions out there. Next slide. So looking kind of beyond 2021, you can go ahead and go to the next slide again. A little bit about what we're projecting, as I mentioned about it, this year or last year, 2020, 62% down in activity. We're projecting about a 30% decline next year, about a 15% decline in 2022, and then getting close to 2019 levels back in 2024. Next slide. As far as our budget is concerned, we're projecting about $331 million in revenues this year. Again, our projection originally in 2020 was about $406 million, and then moving forward to the next slide, you can see about $195 million in operating expenses. Our original budget in 2020 was about $212 million, so we've cut about $18 million out of our operating budget. I'm going to move into, if you want to move to the next slide, MSP Reimagine, some of our capital development programs, give you a little sense of what we're looking at for an investment in 2021, about $185 million. You can see different areas of investment. I'll talk to a few of those as we move forward. Typically, we see anywhere from 200 to 250 and sometimes up to 300 million in investment. We cut 125 to 130 million out of our capital improvement program right off the bat. We needed to do that, but at the same time, there's projects that certainly it's been beneficial to move forward at this time. One was our inbound roadway. Once the MnDOT project reached our property line, we redid our inbound roadway the rest of the way. We would find no better time to do that than this year. So that was an important project moving forward. Next slide. One of the major improvements that we currently have going on is what we call operational improvements. It's a complete remodeling and expansion of our ticketing and baggage claim and vertical circulation elements. We're actually adding 15 feet to the front of Terminal 1 along the entire length. You may have been inconvenienced by this project over the last few years. It's going to turn into be about an 8-year project. It has to be done in multiple phases. We were doing this project to support up to 55 million passengers, out 20 years from now. The nice thing now, though, is by adding that additional square footage to the building, it's really going to help us with social distancing. So it's interesting how the feeling and the thought behind projects change as we get into these major situations. Next slide. This just gives you a little sense of the work on the same program in our baggage claim area, completely redoing all of our baggage carousels, again, adding more space around them, which will help us from a social distancing standpoint, raising the ceiling height in that area, which typically has been kind of a dark and dingy area, one of the areas of the terminal that has not been remodeled for many years, but you'll notice really some tremendous improvements there. Next slide. Another project that we've been working on is as we were in good times, Delta came to us and said, we need another Sky Club, and we'd like to put it on Concourse G. So we've been working with Delta on shelling out that Sky Club. But the nice thing about this project also is if you've been on Concourse G, you recognize we kind of have corridors that go down along our walkways and then areas that bump out for the gates. Those areas, because it's a very busy Delta concourse with some large aircraft, get very congested, and the restrooms have not been upgraded. So we're actually building those pods out to accommodate additional seating, additional concessions, and new restrooms. So this is going to be a fantastic project, and good timing continuing to move forward with it because of the limited passenger volume and just the lack of disruptions that we have to cause in our passengers. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of reliever airports. Lake Elmo Airport, very important project where we are realigning the runway down there. We had to realign the county road on the south side of that facility. That's a $5 million project. That project continues to move forward with major work on the reconstruction of the runway planned for this year, which will be phase 3. A lot of work has gone into that project. And then another, if you want to go to the next slide, another airport I want to highlight is Crystal Airport, where what we say about that airport used to have parallel runways, east-west parallel runways, and through a long-term planning study, really right-sized the airport. The airport isn't as busy as it was many years ago. It used to be one of the busiest airports in the country. And so we've right-sized the runway. We've actually taken one of those parallels out, made the main runway just a little bit longer, and reconstructed those pavements, and incorporated more safety design measures because it was an airport that had some runway incursion issues, and put in a new fueling system. So that project is basically complete, and another nice addition to our system. And then I think we're about done. Just the next slide is just really about the economic impact of the airport, as Chair Zelli referred to. Tremendous asset. Obviously, MSP provides about $16 billion in economic output, supports 87,000 jobs. That number is based on both direct and indirect positions. There's about 21,000 jobs, people that work at the airport. And then our reliever airport system is very important as well, contributing about $750 million and over 1,000 jobs at those reliever airports. So with that, I think that is my presentation, and happy to respond if there's any questions to counselors.
Thank you so much, Brian. And any questions for Mr. Ricks? Riva.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. It's just so interesting. We don't get to hear about what's going on at the MAC as often, so it's just very interesting. I'm curious about your projections to kind of get back to the break-even point with in 4 years with your traffic. How did you come about those projections?
Chair Zelli and Councilor Chambliss, those are, we have a team of consultants that we use from a forecasting standpoint. And those were really, it's based on that information that has really come forward. Obviously, forecasts, especially at a time like this, are, are their guesses at some point, but they take analysis, a lot of analysis in. And so we've brought in analysis from trends of all over the country and what we've seen, compared it to what we've seen from past events, although this one is unusual and more deep than anything we've ever seen in this industry. We applied those forecasts also to this year, or to, I should say, 2020. And what we found in applying those forecasts to 2020 is that we are right in the middle of a number of different forecasts. And we've got an optimistic forecast, a very conservative forecast, and then one right in the middle. And what we found out this year is we're right in the middle. Obviously, those numbers will ebb and flow based on if we see additional waves, additional strains. So, but I am, I think, more optimistic. I do believe there's a pent-up demand for travel. And as long as people feel that they'll be safe. So I think as we see the vaccinations continue to occur, I really believe we will see travel come back. I think sooner than even some of those forecasts are anticipating. So that's really what went into those forecasts.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Brian. I just really appreciate the work of you and the commissioners and just everybody at MAC. We just have one of the best airports. I should maybe just say the best airport in the world. And, in my former role at Greater MSP, I really gained a deep appreciation for the work that you're doing. And ahead of the pandemic, I know you were working through Greater MSP as it relates to the airport being a fundamental driver of our economy and economic growth. And knowing how important that is to many businesses that are here already looking to expand or coming to this region on a short list visit. But with the pandemic at hand, is some of that work still taking place where either with Greater MSP as the conduit for non-disclosure of corporate information, but are you still working essentially, with Greater MSP and or business community leaders, again, trying to understand and gather some intel about, what the demand really is for future routes, and, what that might look like, post-COVID. And then because we generally, but thanks to your leadership, picked up some new routes. You mentioned Amsterdam earlier, and Mexico City, I believe, was one. How are those routes looking? Because I know they were very important to our economy. And are they in danger now because of COVID? Is there any additional risk for the new routes? So kind of a two-part question.
Chair Zelli and Councillor, great question. And so we've lost Dublin, Aer Lingus. We are hopeful to get them back, but they won't be back this year. The good news is we were able to get them, and they were able to experience and actually do fairly well during their time here. Seoul was another route that we were fortunate to get. Mexico City, another one. And that was, to your point, that was a collaboration between the MAC and Greater MSP through the Regional Air Services Partnerships, where we really brought key companies and the top travel companies together to really talk about how we could make a difference and how we could gain information and then bring that information to the airlines and really be forward thinking about and letting the airlines know that our business community is dedicated and committed to new air service opportunities. So the good news is that happened a couple of years ago, and we really got that thing off and running, and we don't have to reinvent that. We have kept that group engaged and have also told them that now, as we move forward, is going to be more important than ever, because you are going to have all of these communities around these major hub airports trying to gain service that has been lost back. So we're continuing to engage them, and we will continue to do that. And what I've told Peter Frosch and our staff is that we need to do things so that we stand out and so that we're at the front of the pack. And we've developed really good relationships through Delta and Sun Country and other airlines through that effort. And so that will be vitally important moving forward. The other thing I'll just mention, which may be of some interest to this group, is we're also currently we're just starting a major cargo study to determine if there's additional opportunities surrounded around cargo. We don't want to lose businesses. And Chair Zelli, you know what I'm talking about. When we went down to Memphis and toured the FedEx facility and saw a major business that moved to that area because of that cargo lift capability. We want to keep those businesses here, and so we've started a major effort around that too, and hopefully that will tell us some things that we can work on as well.
Brian, just following up on that was really illuminating, looking at Memphis and realizing that it's not just passengers. We're perfectly situated in the middle part of the country, but we have a lot of we don't want to lose those businesses. Thinking about Delta, and I think I know the answer. I mean, this has been a very profitable hub for them. But do you think, kind of on a bigger scale, is there going to be a consolidation? Are we going to is the industry going to lose hubs, and we got to kind of retain what we got, or just generally, I imagine they're going to be looking for greater efficiencies.
Chair Zelli, another great question. What I will say is that we are positioned really well here from a Delta perspective because we're a profitable market for them because of the numbers of Fortune 500 businesses that we have here in this region. So Delta, we talked to Delta a lot early on as we were getting into COVID and we were asking those questions. And the response we always received is that we are focused, as we rebuild this network and bring capacity back, we are first and foremost focused on our 4 major hubs in Atlanta, Minneapolis, Detroit, and Salt Lake City. And so we are, I feel, in a really good position. And I think the fact that they brought Amsterdam back, I mean, we lost it here for a short duration, but the signals is they want to bring that back as quickly as possible. So I think we're positioned well. From a leisure standpoint, too, the transformation of Sun Country, they had some growing pains, as we all know, but that transformation has been much more significant than I think many people realize, because they are an example of them adding 9 additional routes. They have an operating model that they were the only airline that was profitable last year, which says a lot. Now, a big part of that profitability is their arrangement with Amazon and flying cargo, but they have some leadership there that is really ahead of the game, and they like Minneapolis, and so we need to keep that going well. But I think, to answer your question, I don't think, you always want to be cautious, obviously, but I don't think we are in any, we don't have any concern of losing the hub. And I think there was so much hub consolidation after 9/11. I think we've seen most of that work out. So I'm not expecting you to see that type of reduction in hubs. I think it's more of a matter of the amount of flights and gaining that activity, the pre-COVID activity back.
Any other questions? Well, Brian, thank you so much for giving us your time and presentation. And we are always interested, and we really do look on the MAC as being a sister, brother, anyway, just an important partner for us in the council. We have so much kind of overlocking interest in the economic prosperity of this area, this region. So please come by again, and you're welcome anytime. And we look forward to seeing you at meetings, which I'm sure, whether it's at the legislature or somewhere else, we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Appreciate the dialogue, and we'll come back at any time. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So we're going to move on to our regular agenda, and we're jumping into the consent agenda. So if there's a motion and a second to approve the
Chair
consent
Zally,
agenda.
this is Representative Sterner. I'd motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Representative Sterner. Councilmember Sterner.
Councilmember
Is there a
Sterner.
second?
Okay.
Well, I don't, Counselor. I like Counselor. That sounded nice. Yeah, no, Council member. Is there a second?
Second by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Any discussion? If not, Liz, call the roll.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musset, Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. Well, that motion's carried. Now we're on to standing committees. And first up, Community Development, Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. The single item we bring forward from Community Development Committee is business item 2021-2. It's to authorize the 2021 Regional Parks Systems Competitive Equity Grant Program Notice of Funding Availability. Council members remember that the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the council committed to developing a set-aside competitive equity grant program to strengthen equitable use of the regional park system. So our thanks to our predecessor council for including that. And then in 2019, this council established a competitive equity grant program through a pilot program that awarded 3 capital projects to the regional park implementing agencies. This pilot program illustrated a need for additional funding and particularly for non-capital program funding. So the council responded by authorizing $1.4 million in parks interest earnings for use in this funding cycle of the equity grant program. The council prioritizes using these funds for non-capital programming projects, and additionally, $664,000 in council bonds has been authorized for the program for capital equity projects. In 2021, the Notice of Funding Availability establishes the program guidelines and intentions for the Competitive Equity Grant Program. This grant program is for the 10 regional park implementing agencies only, but they are encouraged to work with the community partners and organizations to propose and shape projects that will increase equitable use of the regional park system. A review committee will score projects and make funding recommendations that will be brought to the council later this year. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the 2021 Regional Parks System Competitive Equity Grant Program Notice of Funding Availability attached to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Atlas Ingebretson.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Liz?
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. The Environment Committee has reports on the consent agenda. And next is the Management Committee. Councilmember Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Management Committee just has one business item. It's business item 2021-09, labor agreement with the Transit Managers and Supervisors Association, TMSA. The TMSA contract expired on December 31st, 2020. TMSA represents 303 managers and supervisors working across all divisions of Metro Transit. Following recommendations from the TMSA Executive Board, the TMSA membership ratified the agreement on December 18th, 2020. Highlights of the agreement include a one-year contract effective January 1st, 2020, and expiring December 31st, 2021. Employees will receive an average lump sum payment of $1,500 per person. Individual payment amounts will vary as the union has elected to use some of the agreed upon compensation as recognition pay for attendance during the early months of the pandemic. The cost of the labor agreement was reviewed by finance and was negotiated within the economic parameters established by the council. This item was reviewed and adopted by the Management Committee on January 13th, 2021. Mr. Chair, the Management Committee moves approval to authorize the Regional Administrator to enter into a labor agreement with the Transit Managers and Supervisors Association effective January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2020.
Is there a second?
Johnson seconds. And
Thank
ending
you.
December 31st, 2021.
2021. Yeah, in the, maybe if Marcy's on, the notes had that the contract runs from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2021. I think that might have been a typo, or it's January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. We just got a clarification on that.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Ferguson, yes, that would be correct. A one-year agreement effective the 1st of 2021.
I know sometimes we negotiate for a year before we get an agreement, but in this case, I think that'll be perfect. So the motion is as written in the packet. That is correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. We have
Not at
a
all.
motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. Just so I understand, so basically this would be a one-time payment, but it wouldn't be, say, a cost of living adjustment or a raise, right? And I guess my question is, I know that we're dealing with a challenging times here, and obviously I think all of us would agree that our employees deserve a raise in the form of a COLA. And so I guess my question is, there's nothing in this agreement that would prevent us from, say, factoring in this bonus, but it not being a COLA in future years, correct?
Marcy, do you want to?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fredson, you're correct. It is not on the base. It does not affect any decisions that we make regarding future bargaining with this union with regard to, how or what decisions we make about something. But again, this is all subject to review and approval by the council and the management committee, because obviously those parameters are established in that setting to begin with.
And just a quick follow-up.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So the spirit of my question is that, I think that ideally we would be in a position to provide folks a COLA or some kind of adjustment to their wage, because then in the future, if they were to get a raise, it would be a raise on top of the raise. And in this case, it's a one-time bonus, but then in the future years, if they were to get a raise, that wouldn't be factored in to the raise. So, I think we all or at least I personally understand the financial pressures that the Met Council is under, but I just hope that fellow council members understand that when these contracts come up for renewal in the future, that's something that if times are better, we should consider. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments, discussion, questions? Okay, hearing none. Liz, you may call the roll.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
No.
and Chair Zelli.
Aye. Okay, that motion carried. We're on now to the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 business items for consideration this evening. The first, Mr. Chair and council members, is business item number 2021-10, which relates to the annual review of the Metropolitan Airports Commission, MAC Capital Improvement Program, CIP. And thank you again to Mr. Ricks for being here tonight. So it's nice we could manage to align these 2 things. So with this action, that we're seeking for the council to find that the Metropolitan Airport Commission had an adequate public participation process for the development and review of its 2021 to 2027 capital improvement program, including preparation of an assessment of environmental effects, OAEE, for 2021 projects with potential environmental effects. And then secondly, that we find that the 2021 CIP projects are in conformance with the region's aviation system plan and consistent with council policy. The MAC annually prepares a CIP for projects at MSP International Airport and their 6 general aviation reliever airports. Under state statutes 473.181 and 473.621, the council must determine adequacy of public participation in the CIP process, approve CIP projects meeting certain dollar thresholds, which are $5 million at MSP and $2 million at reliever airports and others with significant effects criteria, review and comment on all projects for consistency with the transportation policy plan, including planning and environmental concerns. Initial analysis of the future years, 2022 to 2027, of the CIP shows that some projects will meet the dollar threshold of review, but do not appear to meet the significant effects criteria. Due to the COVID-19 impact, there have been many projects that have been moved out to later years. All projects in the 2021 CIP are consistent with the Transportation Policy Plan and the Regional Aviation System Plan. There are no funding implications for the Council, federal, state, and MAC funding has been identified by the MAC for most projects in the 2021 CIP. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council find that the 2021 to 2027 MAC CIP is consistent with council policies, conforms to the regional aviation system, and identifies no projects for the council to approve this year.
All right. Is there a second?
Councilmember Ferguson will second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferguson. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. Liz, you can call the roll.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2021-12 is regarding the 56th regional solicitation project approved for funding by TAB in December. The next two business items are connected. It's the regional solicitation and the HSIP. And in your packets, you have maps of projects included by council district and one-page descriptions of each of the projects. And I'm going to turn it over now to Steve Peterson, who will present a brief presentation on the process and highlight some of the projects.
All right, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Chair Barbara. I'm going to keep my video off. It's a little slow here this evening. Thanks to Chair Barbara for all of her work over the last 2 years. Also want to mention Amy Venowitz and Nick Thompson here, who I report to. And I can't forget Councilmember Cummings here, who was part of about eight or so meetings back in the summer of 2019 to help us get to some of the outcomes that we're going to be talking about today. So with that, next slide, please, Greg. So today we've got two business items for you. As Chair Barbara said, they're connected. We'll talk about them both in this presentation, but what we're asking of you is for concurrence on the TAB action on both the regional solicitation, the $214 million, as well as $33 million of project awards, also federal funding in the HSIP program, Highway Safety Improvement Program. Next slide, please. So what TAB is approved and is sending for your concurrence is a total of 56 projects spread across the 7-county metro. We'll highlight a few of those to give you some flavor for what those may be and what you'll be seeing 4 and 5 years down the road in our region. Also 2 set-asides in there. We'll talk about the ABRT, but also did want to mention the $4.9 million set aside for unique projects. You may ask, what is that unique project? And that is the task of TAB and council members such as Councilmember Barber in the next year to figure out what does a unique project mean in this context and what would they like to use the nearly $5 million for. So more on that in the future. Next slide, please. We always want to mention here, especially the council here, we can make a direct linkage back from the projects that we're selecting all the way back to the Thrive outcomes, and you can see the series of steps we take from projects all the way back through the scoring measures and criteria to the long-range plan, the transportation policy plan. Next slide, please. One of the best things about the regional solicitation projects is the kind of open and transparent process that is run. It's a slow project, and that's on purpose. It's a deliberately slow process. It takes us 2 years. But as you can see, almost 70 scorers, which are volunteer technical experts from across the region, participated in evaluating our projects. Next slide, please. And I mentioned this, the Transportation Committee, but even with some of the budget shortfalls that our local agencies are seeing, we did see it probably our highest amount of need ever for the solicitation, and we're only able to fund less than half of those requests, but it just shows that the pent-up demand here for transportation projects across the region, that if there were more money, there's certainly the projects that of a regional nature that we could fund. Next slide, please. Here's a map showing some of the projects throughout the region. One thing to note, projects in all 7 counties. Those 56 projects represent investment in 36 different cities and townships, which I think is quite amazing. You can barely do that on purpose, let alone through a competitive process. So again, those are in the maps that Jenna Ernst here had just sent out. So obviously we want to highlight those with our local communities. It's a big deal for local communities to win these awards and work on these projects. Next slide, please. We've brought forth a couple of the projects to highlight. One here, first is 2 roadway projects. One is on Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis. likely some form of a road diet project where they're reducing the number of lanes. This was a good example of an equity project. Equity is part of the scoring measures used to select the projects, and this was perhaps the highest scoring equity project that we did see. They did a really great job. Hennepin County did, that is, in answering the questions asked of them. Next slide, please. Here's a project we're all happy is going to get done. Combined $7 million here with a big state bonding request that finally came through. And so the Kellogg Bridge, just east of our Robert Street location, will be rebuilt. And obviously some implications for Gold Line and some of our other travel throughout the region. This will be an important one to redo. So we're happy that that did receive $7 million. Next slide, please. Now on to 2 transit projects, the first of which, Burnsville Bus Garage, MVTA, did receive $2.8 million through this solicitation cycle. They'll couple that with an FTA federal award that they also just won, so they'll have a nice project to redo some much needed facility upgrades down in Burnsville. Next slide. One of the main things that Councilmember Barber and Cummings worked on was looking at some of our transit rules, and one of the big changes was to allocate $25 million to the arterial BRT system, and obviously we don't know exactly what that F line is going to be, and you'll be involved with that selection of the F, G, and H lines here in the next few months. But TAB did set aside $25 million to put towards what will become the F line, and I think that was some much needed progress from a funding perspective, where we used to piecemeal fund our ABRT system. In this case, it was one big award for $25 million. Next slide, please. And then 2 on the bike ped side. One of them is in downtown Chaska, Highway 41. Beautiful stretch of roadway. They're going to be reducing the number of lanes and making some significant pedestrian enhancements, widen the sidewalks, streetscaping, et cetera, to make downtown Chaska even better than it is right now. And so that's an example of a $1 million project that will be combined with quite a significant investment here on Highway 41 in Chaska. Next slide, please. And lastly, just to cover our bases across the region, wanted to get one in the North Metro. This is a high-speed roadway, Coon Rapids Boulevard, in the city of Coon Rapids in Oka County, where they'll be doing a grade separation, a bike ped bridge over Coon Rapids Boulevard, connecting to some of our regional trail system. So another great investment. You can see the $2.4 million award, but it's going to be a large project, nearly a $5 million project when it's all said and done. Next slide, please. Again, this is the next business item, but this is the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Very important, and the goal of this, again, is these are federal dollars meant to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on our system. The theme here was funding of 8 roundabout projects out of the 26 across the region. Getting greater emphasis to the pedestrian and bicycle safety, and that's certainly a topic of conversation, is especially in the metro areas, the number of bike and pedestrian crashes, and usually ends up being a serious injury or fatality crash. And so what can we do to reduce those across our system? Next slide, please. Again, what's been emailed to you does show the HSIP projects. Here's the geographic distribution of those projects. Next slide, please. And again, to summarize and go back to the motion at hand, requesting council's concurrence on the regional solicitation, which is 2021-12, and the HSIP project list 2020 or 2021-13 to add these projects to the draft transportation improvement program, or the TIP. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you, and thanks for your time here today, and obviously we want to spread the good news here to our local communities on some of these projects. So thank you again.
Thank you, Steve. And that's a great presentation, and it really hits on all of our council goals beyond transportation. When you think about economic development, equity, environment, and of course, safety. I particularly like the pictures, not only of the projects, which are really impressive, but the pictures of really thoughtful people who are deeply in thought. Many of them are you all here. Councilmember Barber, you have a motion.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council concur with the Transportation Advisory Board action to include $214 million in federal funding to 56 projects evaluated through the regional solicitation in the draft Transportation Improvement Program.
Is there a second?
Cummings seconds.
Thank you, Molly. Any discussion, more questions, thoughts? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to highlight a couple of things, and one is really a big thanks to a large number of people that goes into what we're voting on today. From our staff, from Director Thompson, Amy Venowitz, Steve Thompson, and many more who have participated in this, to TAB, to TAC funding and programming, to the people who took the time to score and to comment. It's really a collaborative effort, and so this is something that really does take 2 years to get to this point, and so it's a really exciting day. And then I'm just going to share a little anecdote, because I think either that's an example of exceptional planning, which I'm sure Director Thompson will point to, or somebody just good karma going on. But as we were talking about this, Steve was presenting the MVTA item. The MVTA bus drove right in front of my window. So somebody planned something very, very well.
All right. Any other? I think Councilmember Wolf. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know everybody worked really hard on this. I just wanted to express a little concern about the geographic distribution of the things that ended up being awarded. It was funny, I looked at that PDF that Jenna sent out, and they put District 14 and 15 together on one map, because otherwise, 15 and 16 on one map, because otherwise if they had District 16 by itself, it would have been an empty map. And I'm not saying that as, I want stuff for my area. I noticed Scott County was sort of underrepresented. Carver was overrepresented. Western Hennepin County had very little. And I know it just works out that way sometimes, but I want to make sure that over time we end up with a fair distribution of projects throughout the region, and that some people don't get left out.
All right, thank you for that comment. It might be interesting to do a map showing over numbers of years, not just one. Kind of makes sense. Councilmember Barber?
Mr. Chair, that is one thing I was going to say. That is something we do, and there's also another process that we do every time we go through this cycle. Is we do a look back, and we make sure that we're looking at the right evaluation criteria and everything going forward, and that will inform the next regional solicitation. And we found that's something really important to do over time. Because we want to make sure that, to Councilmember Wolf's point, that we, are getting the money out throughout the region to help and have real impact across the region.
Any other thoughts? All right, hearing none. Liz, you may please call the roll.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Vento. Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zurin.
Aye.
Chairzelli.
Aye. That motion carried. And Councilmember Barber, you have one more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2021-13 is regarding 23 highway safety improvement projects approved for funding by TAB in December. Just as some quick points, there are maps of HSIP's projects presented by council districts are included on the regional solicitation maps for your reference. couple of key things to highlight is there are 8 new roundabout projects that are funded, and this really was focused on, there was a greater focus on pedestrian safety projects with this HSIP. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council concur with the Transportation Advisory Board action to include $33.2 million in federal funding to 26 projects evaluated through the HSIP solicitation in the draft Transportation Improvement Program.
Thank you. I just want to note that Councilmember Bento did vote aye on the last roll call, but now we're looking for a second to the motion.
Bento seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions?
Can you please repeat who second?
Councilmember Bento.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? No? Alrighty, Liz, please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson?
Aye.
Barber?
Aye.
Chambliss?
Aye.
Cummings?
Aye.
Ferguson?
Aye.
Fredson?
Aye.
Gonzalez?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Lilligren?
Aye.
Lindstrom?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Vento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zurin?
Aye.
Cherzelli?
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, Councilmember Barber, Transportation Committee, everybody involved. That motion carried. It's fitting because our next order of business are 2 business items addressing the appointments to the advisory committees as items 2021-25 and 2021-35. The advisory committees and its members, this is really the Transportation Advisory Board and the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee that brings you this kind of work for the regional solicitation and other work. So, and I actually was not only making fun of those pictures because it shows how many hours and days and efforts it takes to help do the work and the analysis to put forward those 56 projects, those 13 safety improvements. Those are really critical for our region, and it really is a human process that we are now looking at due to some term expirations to ratify some new members and some existing members to continue their new terms. There are 4 community member openings on the tab and 5 on the TAC. In addition to those, we are reappointing Mayor Jim Hovland to continue serving as the Transportation Advisory Board Chair for another year. And just so everyone knows, we have recruited, we made attempts to recruit pretty broadly to fill these positions through both all of your networks, also the council communications channels since November. I particularly want to do a shout out for Councilmember Barber, Vento, Fredson, Wolf, and Johnson for serving on the nominating committee. That is also quite a bit of work to go through, not just the cultivation and recruitment, but the evaluation, going through all the paperwork and reviewing applications, interviewing candidates. That's a heavy lift. So on top of everything else, you do that to make these recommendations for me. And why would I ever question those recommendations? Because they've been so thoroughly vetted that I absolutely 100% have concurred. So in those business items, 2021-25 and 2021-35, those are my recommendations as chair for the appointments to the Transportation Advisory Board and the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. Unless a council member would like to discuss any of these recommendations individually or has a question about the process or any particular person, I would entertain one motion to move these advisory committee appointment recommendations. Is there a motion?
Moved by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Is there a second?
It's Fredson. I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Fredson. Any discussion? All those in favor? We will take a roll.
Atlas Ingebretson.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf. Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you. Zurin.
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. Thank you all. We have one other information item, and I think everybody's interested in the legislative report. The governor's budget has been revealed, and Judd and I are spending a lot of time with our legislators. So, Judd, bring us up to speed.
Well, that's great. And thank you, Charlie. I believe that the screen is being shared here, and I'm having to put on my glasses here so I can read it. But and Greg, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And so thank you very much. So as folks know, we're in our third week here of the 2021 the 2021 legislative session, and it convened just 3 weeks ago, and the committees have been holding a mini informational hearing type committee hearings because obviously we have a number of new members in the House and Senate, and so we spend a lot of time bringing folks up to speed on our role, our statutory responsibilities, and the work that the council does. And Chair Zelli did a great job last week with the House Local Government Committee, giving them that overview. Next Tuesday, we'll be in front of the Senate Transportation Committee talking about our role and responsibilities in transit and transportation planning. And so we are really kind of hitting the ground running with a lot of this information. So that has been helpful. Just a quick anecdote here. I'll just let folks know, and I know I'm not here to talk about the Blue Ribbon Committee, but that meeting, it sounds, is going to be scheduled for February 10th in the House Local Government Committee. But in the weekly information that you receive from Brooke, all of that information will be there as well. I was just on a call a few seconds before this happened, before I was before the committee here in order to get that confirmed. So late breaking news if people want to tune in on that. But this session, the legislature and the administration have a lot of work to do. We have a projected budget deficit, and so the House and Senate and the governor will be working toward an agreement on that. Obviously, we are in a pandemic still, and so there will be a lot of work related to the state's response to the COVID-19 and the logistical challenges that come along with that. And then another major issue that the legislature deals with is redistricting. The House and Senate both have 2-year terms. Normally, the Senate has 4-year terms, but this last election was for a 2-year cycle. So the next election that will occur in November of 2022 means that all 201 of the legislative seats are open as well. And in this case, it'll be the governor's seat will be up for re-election as well. And so, Greg, you want to go to the next slide? So the biggest news here is obviously in these legislative sessions, the first year of the biennium is to deal with the the budget. And the November budget forecast came out and projected a budget surplus of $641 million for the current biennium, which ends June 30th of 2021. And so that's significant that those numbers changed pretty significantly. Once upon a time, we were anticipating a major budget deficit for fiscal year 21, which the legislature would have had to come back and address that because our state's constitution requires a balanced budget. But now we've got a budget surplus, which is great. And the projected budget deficit now is $1.273 billion, where previously that number was much steeper, closer to the $4 billion range. And so there has been some good financial news related to that based on the November forecast. But the forecast, the meat and potatoes forecast, is the February forecast, which will come out late February, early March, because this is the budget forecast that the state will complete their budget agreement on. And so that is where you will see adjustments. We will get updated MVEST numbers at that point as far as the council and MnDOT are concerned. And so that is the forecast that the legislature pays the most attention to, and it's also a time when governors oftentimes have come back and made adjustments to their budgets in a supplemental budget based on changes in revenue and changes in those revenue forecasts. And so just to reiterate, the numbers that will come out in the February forecast will be the updated numbers that the House and the Senate and the governor and we will use in order to craft a budget agreement for the fiscal years 22 and 23 biennium. Do you want to go to the next slide, Greg? Great, thank you. So obviously, big news yesterday is that the governor proposed his budget yesterday. They're calling it Minnesota's COVID relief recovery budget. Next slide, please. And in that budget, there is a total of $2.58 billion that is they're solving a budget gap of $1.28 billion, and then there's new investments of $1.3 billion. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this, but I can say that the governor's priorities are getting the vaccine out, his priorities are getting kids back in school, and that his budget is aiming to relieve the pandemic's effect on students, low-income families, and small business owners. And in particular, for students, he wants to make sure that there are academic opportunities and mental health services for students as we hopefully make our way out of this pandemic, because in the bigger, broader scale, this is what the governor's budget is focused on. And I can talk a bit about the council's, representation in that budget if we want to go to the next slide. So first, in the regional park system, we received $9.14 million each year for parks operations and maintenance, and that money is distributed amongst the 10 Metropolitan Regional Park implementing agencies. And that money is a combination of lottery in lieu of sales tax and general funds. And these are just basically base amounts that we have received in the past, and it's good that these dollars remain consistent. The next piece is the Legacy Parks and Trails Fund. Folks may recall that there has been a 40-40-20 split between metropolitan area regional parks, state parks, and greater Minnesota parks and trails. And that 40-40-20 split is consistent with where we were previous. And you can see the numbers there is $21.6 million for fiscal year 22 and $19.57 million for fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. So also, we participate in the Clean Water Fund as part of the legacy funds, and in there we're receiving $919,000 each year of the biennium, so fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, for water supply sustainability program that the council runs through our environmental services division. And then we're also receiving $250,000 each year for water efficiency grant programs. And I'd just like to add that these are programs that the council has participated in and received funding through the Clean Water Fund for many years. And it's just gratifying to see that these continue to be supported by the administration. I know they're very important to the goals of the council and the goals of the Metropolitan Council as well, not just the members. And so we were happy to see that this is continuing to be brought forward, and look forward to working with the legislature to make sure that they get funded again for the next biennium. Next slide, please. This next piece is one of the few policy initiatives that we have this next year. And as long as we're talking about the Clean Water Legacy Funds, council members may or may not know that we had previously received a Clean Water Legacy Fund appropriation to deal with, I guess, trying to fix the effects of private I&I in our wastewater utility. And these Clean Water Legacy Funds are very competitive, and we have only been able to achieve an appropriation for them once. And so what we are proposing now is to receive authorization from the state to allow the council to establish an inflow and infiltration program for private properties that would be funded through our municipal wastewater charge. And just so folks know, you probably don't need to hear this because you probably know it better than I do, but we have a lot of clean water that gets into our wastewater system that, first of all, doesn't need to be cleaned, but we have to make sure that we can accommodate the proper amount of pipe to be able to deal with any type of the water that gets into our system. And what we are trying to achieve here is to, at the private side sector, through this private service laterals, we would like to set up a opportunity for grants to be distributed that will encourage private citizens and private homeowners in order to fix that particular issue on their property. We have been very successful with the legislature to receiving general obligation bonding through bonding bills in order to address inflow and infiltration issues in the private sector on private municipal pipes, but we haven't been able to address the issue on the private side. And so one of the things that we are trying to do, and Chair Zelle and I have been having conversations with legislators and receiving some positive feedback related to this. One of the questions that is raised is, how do we pay for that? As we mentioned, we would be funding it through the municipal wastewater charge. However, we don't believe that there will be an impact on that charge, because what we are proposing to do is to defer some capital maintenance in order to make sure that there is not going to be an increase in the municipal wastewater charge. I believe that will make it easier for us to work with the legislature on getting something passed with this. But we also get the environmental benefits of keeping our clean water in Minnesota and not treating it, having to pay for that, put in larger pipes, and then cleaning it and sending it down the Mississippi River. So we not only do we get the financial benefit of this, we also get the strong environmental benefit of making sure that that clean water remains in our ground. Next slide, please. On transportation policy, we have two other policy initiatives. The first one is more of a technical housekeeping proposal that will allow us to clarify in statute and to regulate the use of bus rapid transit guideway lanes, and to specifically have it done to prohibit the use of them by non-transit users. This has not been an issue for us in the past. However, with the Orange Line soon coming online, and with the Gold Line down the way, we have this new BRT guideway lanes, which on the Orange Line more or less relates to the underpass under 494, and then the dedicated lane for the Gold Line. But we just would like to get that clarified in statute so it's in place before those services go online. And the second piece should not be a surprise to anyone. The council is still bringing forward a transit safety initiative that is broader than this, but what we need is legislative approval to really accomplish two things. The first thing that we'd like to do is to reduce the penalty from a misdemeanor to an administrative citations for persons who are cited for fare evasions. We don't believe that we believe that this is similar to a parking ticket, creating a misdemeanor for not paying a $2.50 or $3 fare ticket. It does not fit. That is, we found that our partners at the counties are not prosecuting this because this is a much heavier penalty than is appropriate. And so what we're trying to do is to make that an administrative citation, a program that the council can operate. And then the second piece is to allow someone other than a sworn police officer to inspect fares and issue administrative citations. And this allows us to have more of a presence on our platforms, to have more of a presence on our trains, and hopefully have a positive effect on basically establishing new expectations for behaviors that we are seeing that are frankly creating issues of safety or the concern of their safety. And so we need the legislature's assistance to really accommodate or accomplish those two things. I will add that Chair Zelle and I have had a number of conversations over the past couple of weeks with a number of legislators in order to educate them a bit more on what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think we've had some positive response. But it is, I just would like to remind folks, it's very difficult to get things passed at the legislature no matter what. And doing it from my basement in Lakeville makes it that much harder when I can't be standing outside members' doors, tracking them down on the House or Senate floor. It's much harder when you actually have to set up an appointment. But we are working this issue extremely hard. I know it is a priority for the governor and lieutenant governor as well. And so we are pushing very hard on that. So I can come back and answer questions on this after the presentation if people want. But Greg, you want to go to the next slide? As far as transportation finance, every couple years we go to the legislature and seek additional authority to allow us to levy property tax to pay debt service on transit bonds that we receive authority from the legislature on. We use these bonds in order to be the local match for federal dollars that we received to replace buses, to build bus facilities and other capital investments. These bonds, the authority that we receive applies across the spectrum for transit. This is for Metro Transit, it's for the Metro Mobility, the suburban transit providers receive the benefit of these, as well as our Dial-A-Ride program. So this really is, these bonds are critical for us to be able to keep up with the, like I said, the fleet replacement that we do is the general use of what we use them for, and then other small capital investments. So in the governor's budget, we were recommended to receive base level funding in our general funds for both Metro Mobility and our transit system operations, which are really our rail operations. So we've got $89 million in fiscal year 22, and 88.63 is the recommendation for fiscal year 23. And Greg, if you want to go to the next slide. And so those base appropriations were not sufficient for us to be able to run our operations. Based on those amounts for Metro Mobility, as I just mentioned, about 57 million of the 89 goes towards Metro Mobility. And so over the course of the 2 years, we recognized that we had a nearly a $50 million deficit for Metro Mobility. And then the balance, which was the 32 million each year, that was where we were going to be short for our rail operations to the tune of $17.8 million for the biennium. And so what folks I'm sure have heard is that we received just very recently received a federal appropriation that is allowing us to not ask the state to fill this 48.6 million deficit and $17.8 million deficit with a request from the general fund, which I'd like to draw everybody back to the fact that the state has a budget deficit. And so that is allowing us to not make that request. So these federal dollars are coming in at a very good time for us. But I'm also going to add that, again, that these are one-time dollars. And one-time dollars are great for us in the short term, but this is not addressing our structural problem in our transit finance. And so we are still have long-term needs. We need to have a long-term sustainable funding approach to our system. But while we are in the grip of this pandemic, these one-time monies from our federal partners are coming in at a really good time for us to be able to address what's going on with our deficits in both Metro Mobility and our rail operations. The other piece is, as I mentioned just a second ago, about our transit safety initiative related to our administrative citations. We have a cost that is affixed to that initiative of about $15.3 million for the next biennium, and we are able to accommodate that within the federal dollars that we are receiving as well. So we are not asking the legislature for funding because we're able to accommodate that again within the federal dollars. So the 48.6, the 17.8, and the 15.3, if not for the federal dollars, would be the basic request that we would make to the legislature sans a bigger, broader funding proposal in order to basically allow us to have a lights on bill. The 15.3 million is what we would do in addition to what we would need to our base funding to keep the lights on. And so I hope that's clear to folks. But I don't know if we want to go to the next slide, or this might be my last one. No, I got one more. And so just to give folks a little bit of an idea of the session timeline is, again, I mentioned that we'll get the February forecast that will come out here at the end of February, early March. The legislature will take an Easter Passover break, the end of March, early May. To give people a flavor of how this works, oftentimes the legislature, the House and Senate, will begin working on their budget proposals a couple weeks prior to that Easter Passover break. And then when we come back on Tuesday, April 6th, the work of the legislature will really kick into high gear related to them beginning to process their budget bills through committees and then to the floor. We will have committee deadlines announced sooner than later, which will really reflect when the legislature is going to try to get their work done. The third bullet point there is the legislature must adjourn by May 17th of 2021, which is a great day for those of us who work with the legislature. Unfortunately, in the past, we've had a number of special sessions that continue to go on and on and on. But fact is that the legislature will be adjourning on May 17th, and that will be where we're at. And I'm sure I'll be back before everybody to talk about where things are at, if not before that, but right around that time. And the last thing I'd like to point out is obviously things are happening in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to throw that asterisk out there and let everyone know that if there are potential additional federal actions that may be taken that may impact the governor's broader budget and our activities at the council and how that comes together. So with that is where things stand today, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for John? Councilmember Sterner.
Yes, thank you, Chair Zally. Judd, I just was kind of wondering, I know we had a little bit of it last on the short session, but with the full session, with the COVID, what are we kind of dealing with number of bills, be able to get the bills out and those type of things? Do you see quite a bit of reduction in it, or are we going to go close to business as usual? Can you just give a little bit of sharing that? I know that you talked about the challenges of lobbying from Lakeville, but talk about the bill numbers and what we're looking at passing and that.
Sure. Well, I can't speak to that too eloquently because I don't know. What I'm really hoping is that what I've heard is the revisor's office, who has to draft all these bills and put them together, they are terribly backlogged, and that this is becoming extremely difficult for them to be able to prepare these bills. You got to keep in mind there's 201 legislators who are all working, independently and together in order to bring forward, what they've come to the Capitol for in order to achieve, and then it's just, and then the caucuses have their priorities. Our bills, the agency bills, go to the revisor's office. The governor's budget bill will go to the revisor's office, and so all I can tell you is that I do know that there is a major backlog that is creating some issues related to the release of some of the bills. But I don't know this, but I think since we are working virtually, that and that the legislature has made some definite improvements on how members are able to vote versus how we were doing this back last May, and then through a number of the special sessions, that some of that has gotten better. But we'll see. I mean, things are going to be really interesting when we start having committee hearings and we start having amendments to bills and we start trying to have testimony. I can't necessarily raise my hand sitting in the back of the committee room to go up and clarify a statement that was being made, when oftentimes, if you're not specifically participating in that particular bill, you're not necessarily on the chat that allows you to raise your hand virtually to go get that corrected. So lots of emails. I'll tell you the other difficulty is, and I tried to mention this a little bit ago, is I spend a lot of my time at the legislature walking around and tracking down members. I know folks who work up at the council members that spend a lot of time at the legislature understand how that works, where you're standing outside the House chamber, you're standing outside the Senate chamber, or you're going to talk to a committee administrator, a legislative assistant, or a fellow lobbyist who you're either working with a bill on or you're trying to clarify why their position isn't right and ours is so good. There's all of these interactions that you have that we just take for granted that just aren't. They're just not happening right now, and so we need to sort that out. But Councilmember Zirin, it sounds like you have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Councilmember.
You, Chair Zelli. My question is around, the council commissioned a study on solar on landfills. I'm wondering if we're supporting the MPCA in any way to move on that legislation for a legislative fix so that general bonds are bumping up against being able to get some revenue or get projects going solar on landfills. Mr. Chetna, can you speak to that at all? Are we supporting the MPCA in any of those actions?
Well, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Zirin, I am definitely not an expert on that. I will have to get up to speed on where things are or where things are going in those regards. I know we do participate with the MPCA and the climate change sub-cabinet. I will admit that I have not had that conversation with MPCA on that, but I can find out, and I can send a note around to all the council members in the next couple of days, letting you know where all of that stands.
If I could just say just two things, Councilman Lucian, thank you for raising it. I serve on the governor's sub-cabinet for climate, and there's a number of initiatives that are coming with a kind of complete state climate plan. Much of it is not legislative, and it's kind of doing it in conjunction with an advisory committee, which is multi-sector, and I'm aware of the landfill issue, but I'm not sure if that comes as part of a kind of a governor's, overall initiative, and whether we are going to play a role from because we're not a state agency, but we kind of work with the other governor's cabinet members on some of those multi-agency initiatives. But Judd and I can talk about what particular role we'll play on some of those initiatives, like, as you know, electrification, some of those other issues relating to climate is something we all, as a council, care a lot about. So we're going to be part of a coalition within the administration, if that makes sense. Any other questions for Judd? I do want to just double down on something Judd said, which is, it was great to have this CARES Act, both the first round and now we actually haven't received the money, but it has been allocated coming to us for our Metro Transit. That has kind of kept us going. And now we will not have those. We'll have those deficits covered, but we still have a structural deficit in one hand. And then we also have a vision and an aspiration that's even bolder. We have the Transit Next initiatives, all the ABRT, and we certainly want to advance that work. So, and maybe advance even that schedule. So there's a lot of transit advocates who we agree with, so we don't have to be shy about backing away from this longer-term vision. I think it's very much there. But in terms of any new transportation revenue, this is the governor would say this is not the year because it's presenting us with some urgency. But I will certainly be out publicly in the legislature talking to advocates any chance we get to say that is still really important. It's not just our transportation goals, but our access, our accessibility, our equity, our climate, and our affordability with housing access goals as well. So, it's kind of, I think, something we don't want to necessarily say that we're backing away from. Any other thoughts? Oh, Rita.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the Met Council, Chair Zell and Judd, for the efforts to decriminalize the citations. This is huge for our community, and to get that kind of right-sized and have the penalty fit the crime is so important because we all know that we have an issue with mass incarceration and mass criminalization, and this will reduce the impact of that on our community of color, brown, Black folks, and other people who, don't need to be a part of the criminal system. So thank you for that, and I'm hoping that gets passed. And if there's anything that I can do personally to support that effort, please let me know.
Well, we'll get back to you. Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just build on what Councilmember Chambliss said. I also want to remind and hope that as you are chatting, Judd and Charlie, with folks, that we also keep in mind that with the criminalization, it is having an immense impact on minors and actually putting people into the criminal system for things that would have been dealt with on a school bus, because they're happening because we made an agreement and the school district made an agreement that we would put children on our buses. They're now becoming criminal related issues for things like fare evasion because you forgot your bus pass one day. And we've also had those situations escalate in a way that is not acceptable. So I think that's one other aspect of this, just to build onto that conversation, to remind folks of and to not lose sight of. And more districts are interested in having their kids take the city buses. And so we need to, make sure we're getting at that issue sooner rather than later. There's been a couple other issues that have really highlighted how young people, how minors are not been treated fairly, particularly during the pandemic, not by us, but in the state. And so I just think this falls into that category of an issue that is has been unseen and underaddressed for far too long. And is also kind of our creating when we went into partnership with the school district and having students on our buses. So I just hope that's another thing that is really talked about explicitly and that we keep front of mind, because it is very detrimental to the well-being of children. Thank you.
Thank you, Linnea. And also, we do mention the work we're doing with the Citizens League, and that is now really getting going, and having youth represented on those stakeholder committees and on those advisory committees is really important, because that's a perspective, as you point out, we're increasingly concerned that all people need to feel safe, and including those minors who are using our buses. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, Judd, thank you very much. We're going to hear more from you, not tonight, but certainly in the next few months. And as we say, we're just kind of the beginning here, and we will go through this process and stay in touch with all of you. And as Councilmember Chambliss said, yes, there is things you could do. So we will call on everybody to help represent our point of view at the legislature, because this is a process, and I think it's really helpful to have as much as I think Judd misses walking around the Capitol. I do too, but I think we've had some really focused one-on-ones that actually kind of is good, because we actually have their undivided attention, even though it's in front of a screen. So I think those have been good conversations. So we've got to use those to our best advantage.
Right.
Any other last word, Judd? No?
I was just going to say, it's great to see everybody. It's been a while. And so it's always nice to be able to check in with folks. And if you have questions, please reach out to myself and reach out to Brooke. Brooke is a rock star, and she is always on the ball. And I try my best to follow her lead on that. And so we will follow up with you. And if you have questions, just don't be afraid to ask. And we do try to update that weekly legislative report. And there's a lot of information in there. And if you have questions about that, just let us know. And we'll be circling back with you as quick as we can. But thanks a lot. It was great to see everyone.
Does Councilor Lilligren, did you have a question? I'm just noticing this in the chat.
Mr. Chair, that's okay. Thanks. Thanks, Judd, for all your work and for the report. I was just wondering if you had any indication or any insight into whether or not our confirmation hearings would be this session.
That's a good question.
I, for the record, I did ask on behalf of all of us, so I can't say we got a direct answer.
Right. We did meet with Senator Jasinski, who's the new Senate Local Government Committee Chair, who would be where the confirmations of the Met Council Chair and council members would begin. And I think no news is good news in this case. So that's good. We are now entering. It's been almost a couple years now since the council appointments were made, and so things are just moving on, and we'll see where things shake out. But Senator Jasinski didn't give any impression that there was any frustration or concern. So I think those are all good signs. And if something comes up, I will let you know. Oftentimes, in previous years, what has happened is that when we get to this lull between when the budget bills come out of committee and then go to the House and Senate floors, oftentimes there is some, I guess the best way to say it is a little bit of dead time that the legislature will take up appointments. And that may be the case, but that I think it's just going to be even more difficult under these circumstances as well. So long story short, no news is good news, but if something comes up, I promise I will let you know right away, and we'll get everybody prepared, and we'll just go with that. There's nothing to be concerned about.
He didn't give any indication of timing. He did ask, do you want to be confirmed? And I said that we all want to be not unconfirmed.
Exactly. He did say that, just so you know.
Yeah.
All right. Great to see everybody.
Thanks, Judd. One other just quick heads up. In February, we will be kind of confirming any current committee assignments or new ones. So please reach out to me or Mary or both if you would like to be in a different committee, if you'd like the committee around anything, and I'll check in with you. I'll email you just to remind you to give some thought over the next couple of weeks how you are doing the work of the council. So that's an annual issue. Are there any other reports that anybody would like to? It's 6:01. We worked so hard this last 2 weeks, haven't we? Any other reports or items that anybody would like to bring up? All right. How about Mary? Are you here? Do you have anything?
Mr. Chair, I am here, and it's after 6 o'clock. I think we've had enough.
You have many things, but we'll say that. Okay. Anne, how about you?
Mr. Chair, similarly, I had about a half hour's worth of report, but I'll go with no report for today.
Bless you. All righty. Well, stay warm, stay healthy. Great to see everybody. We have a big legislative season ahead, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
We're adjourned.